I do want to get right back into our headlines here as we bring you the latest on the files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime accomplice, has been subpoenaed to testify before Congress in just 2 weeks. This comes after the U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche conducted a 2-day interview with Maxwell at the federal courthouse in Tallahassee, Florida. Maxwell's attorney says she answered all of Blanche's questions, quote, truthfully, honestly, and to the best of her ability. She's currently serving out a 20-year prison sentence after being convicted of sex trafficking minors. When asked if Maxwell has asked for a pardon from President Trump, her attorney said this.
You know, we're going to take one day at a time. I know that's very cliche, but it's true because things are happening so quickly. We haven't spoken to the president or anybody about a pardon just yet. And you know, listen, the president this morning said he had the power to do so. We hope he exercises that power in the right and just way.
Brief remarks right there. He said, just yet. You'll hear that in quotes. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about all of this. So let's bring in Ronald Chapman II, a federal criminal defense attorney over at Chapman Law Group. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here this morning.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I do want to ask you about that quote. When he was asked if Ghislaine Maxwell had asked for a pardon from President Trump, the attorney said, quote, not just yet. What does that mean to you in your legal expertise there?
Well, it sounds like a good sign for Maxwell. It seems like something is on the table. And here's how this would work. She sits down for a proffer and provides as much information as she can to the federal government. And they say, hey, let's make a deal. And what's on the table for a deal like that? She has a pending appeal. She's looking for a pardon, looking to get out of prison. And it looks like that is something that's still on the table, provided her cooperation is successful.
How exactly, when you talk about the pardon, if it were offered, and you kind of touched on this, but would she simply be released immediately? What does it really mean overall?
Yeah, so the Constitution gives the president the power to grant a pardon. In fact, no formal petition needs to be given in order for a pardon to be provided to somebody. Once that happens, once a pardon is executed, then she's effectively released from prison. I would expect that to happen within 2 or 3 days based on DOJ processing. Now, what's very important here is she wouldn't be given a pardon immediately. The tactics likely would be she provides cooperation, people who are involved with Jeffrey Epstein are investigated, possibly she testifies on the witness stand, and as a benefit of all of that, she would get a pardon. So I wouldn't expect it soon, but I would expect some news related to her cooperation to come out very soon.
I wanted to ask you because, as I mentioned here off the top, she has been subpoenaed to testify before Congress. So what are her options there? Does she have to testify? Can she plead the fifth? How does all of that work?
So when somebody is subpoenaed by Congress, they have to testify or they will face contempt of Congress. In this case, it would be a misdemeanor. However, she does have her Fifth Amendment right available to her, which means that she can plead the fifth on every question or on only questions that she believes would lead to potential culpability if she was perhaps investigated for those. Now, likely what will happen is that she will probably negotiate the circumstances of what she will talk about ahead of time. Her attorney will do that, and there will be a limited statement made to Congress. Another thing that we need to address, though, are documents. This subpoena likely relates to documents that Congress wants to look at, so-called the Epstein files. I would expect for her attorneys to have to provide a wealth of documents and information over to Congress in advance of that subpoena, and that's probably going to do a lot more than her testimony.
What information do we think that Congress is looking for? What kind of questions are we talking about? Is all of that still kind of up in the air?
Well, what Congress should be looking for is information that would help them draft legislation that would be related to sex trafficking. They would also look for information to suggest that or to see if other federal agencies did their jobs appropriately. That's what's within Congress's mission. Of course, we all know that Congress doesn't just look for what it's supposed to look for. Oftentimes, they're looking to see if there's maybe some political dirt that might be available related to other people, perhaps those involved with Jeffrey Epstein. We're hearing about 100 names. That could be a relatively large amount of powerful people, politically connected people. And I imagine that is something that right now that Congress is very interested in getting into. Surprisingly, though, the vote to subpoena her received bipartisan support from a lot of people in Congress, which was quite surprising if this list does contain a lot of high profile people on it.
On that same note here, what exactly information-wise do folks need from the Epstein files? Why has this been something that so many people are focused on for so many years?
Yeah, and I think that this is a lot of speculation related to some sort of list, right? There's this idea that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with a lot of powerful people and they engaged in the same conduct with him. To be honest, there's very little evidence of that. Certainly, we've heard about Prince Andrew, we've heard about people taking flights on the jet. But when it actually comes down to it, there's a real question as to whether or not anybody else was involved in Epstein's activities that was a high profile individual. We'll see if those names pan out when we look at the Epstein files, a collection of depositions and papers. But the notion of a list, a single list that contains all these names, isn't something that I think likely exists. And it seems to be that people believe that it's out there because of Pam Bondi's statement. But I think that that's blown a bit out of proportion.